And we're here. Let's see. The attendees should start popping up shortly. There we go. Welcome to everyone who's joining us. I'm sure our numbers will grow as the seconds pass. It's awesome. Okay, let's get this chat set up here. All right, welcome to those of you who have joined us already. We'll be getting started in just a few minutes. So I would like to ask you to find the chat box. You should see a chat box near the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and this is where you're going to send all of your questions. Yay, that's the whole purpose we're here, is to share your questions and get them answered. So find the chat box, shoot a quick hi or hello to me and Katie so that we know you found it. And there is a sticky note I will keep posting, as if you've just joined us, you won't be able to see the sticky note, but there are instructions as to what to do with that chat box. So for those of you who've joined our chat here in the past few seconds, a reminder to find the chat box and shoot a quick hi or hello in there so we know you found it. There's also a sticky note, which I will be reposting regularly to show you guys what you need to be doing with that chat box. So you have the choice of sending to everybody when you send a message. Thank you for those of you who are saying hi, hello, hi Danielle, hi Sydney, hi Florian. I apologize for any mispronunciation of names throughout the course of this webinar. Please forgive me. Okay, so you guys have found the chat box. Awesome. Now I want you to find the mode. So it's a little question mark, and click the question mark to change it to Q&A mode. All right, so one person's found that mode. Everybody else try and find that mode and make sure it says Q&A mode. So this will let us know when you've asked a question, and this will make it easier to identify your questions as we go along. So make sure you're set in Q&A mode. The other thing, if you want to send to everybody or you don't mind everybody seeing your name attached to a question, you can leave it as send to everyone. If you want your questions to be just sent to myself and Katie, then please change it to send to admin only. And that means that we will not attach your name to that question when we answer it. So I will let you choose your mode. Please set to Q&A mode. And again, all of these instructions are in this sticky note, which I will continue to repost, as anybody who's joined us since I said that last will not be able to see it. I have to love the restrictions of technology. There we go. All right, so we're still waiting on quite a few people to join us at this point, but thank you to those of you who have arrived on time. It's lovely to see you online. Hope you're enjoying your lovely afternoon, as most of you will be in afternoon in the time zone at this point. My name is Heidi, and I'm an advisor with Canada Law from Abroad, and I'm here hosting this session with our alumnus, Katie. Katie, give a wave, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Yeah, and Katie will be helping to answer all of your questions today. So between the two of us, we're hoping to be able to answer all of your queries. If we do miss anything over the course, please do resend your questions so we will make sure to see it, but we will try and be as thorough as we can in our responses. Make sure that all of your questions about going overseas for law school, transitioning back to Canada, getting a job, all of those things are answered. So that is our goal for today, and we're really happy you've been able to join us. Thanks, everyone. Yes, it is exciting, Florian. We are excited to be here too. Thank you for continuing to post your highs and hellos. We'll give it a few more minutes as we're still waiting for a good dozen people or so to join us. And it does take a couple minutes to get online. So we'll give them a couple more minutes. This is your 2-minute warning to grab a glass of water or a drink of some other form. Use the loo. Get ready to sit in and have those questions answered. So 2-minute warning. And I'm going to stop talking for those 2 minutes and hydrate because I'm going to need that. All right, keep sending your highs and hellos. Find that question box. Awesome job, guys. 2 minutes. All right, just giving it a few more minutes for the rest of the people to join us. Just a reminder to update your chat settings to whether you prefer to send to admin only or send to everyone, and make sure you're in Q&A mode so that we can easily see that you have asked a question, and it'll make it that much easier for us to answer your questions. All right, we'll give it one more minute as we're still waiting on a few people. Make sure you've got a drink and you're settled in and we're ready to ask those questions. Okay, got a good range of people with us here today. That's awesome. All right, so as we're giving one more minute for those latecomers to join us, we're hoping that they didn't get distracted by the lovely weather outside and they're actually able to join us for our awesome chat today. So again, for those of you who's joined us since I announced this last time, my name is Heidi and I am a advisor with Canada Law from Abroad. And some of you may be familiar with me as you've been emailing back and forth with me for months, years, some of you longer. It's been a good timeline with my students. And I'm really excited to be hosting you guys today and also hosting our guest speaker, Katie, as Katie has worked with the company for a number of years and she is here happy to answer your questions and share about her experience of going through studying an LLB and transferring it back to Canada and then getting a job, which is where we're at now, which is super exciting. Congratulations, Katie. So I think we are ready to get started. I'm sure other people will pop on as we talk, but I want to make sure everybody has found the chat box. A lot of you sent highs and hellos, which is awesome. Make sure throughout the course of the session that you're typing your questions in there. Type them in, hit enter as quickly as you can. So we make sure we get all of your questions in. And we will answer them in groupings of topics. So if there's anything specific that comes up while we're talking, make sure to ask that question as well if we want to be able to answer it. Perfect. Okay, so at this point, I will stop talking for the moment and pass it over to Katie so she can introduce herself and then we'll get started on your questions. Take it away, Katie.
All right, thanks, Heidi. So as Heidi said, my name is Katie. I graduated from the University of Kent in 2014. Following my graduation, I returned to Ontario and completed my Ncaas and the lawyer licensing process, which included the bar exams and articling. I was then called to the bar in 2017. Since being called, I have practiced exclusively in the area of family law, and I'm currently practicing at Moreau Family Law in Barrie. I am also a current member on the board of directors for Children's Treatment Network of Simcoe York. So I'm really excited to answer your questions, so I'll let you flood me with them, and then I'll give you more information as we go along.
Excellent. So everybody must be typing furiously because we're waiting for someone to hit enter with a question here. So as we're waiting for those questions, Katie, can you talk about why you chose a 3-year LLB program as opposed to a 2-year LLB program?
So I did only do the 2-year LLB program. I didn't do a 3-year LLB.
Excellent. See, that was my confusion. There we go.
Yes, so I had an undergrad here first from Mcmaster, a 4-year program, and then I went over to the University of Kent and did the 2-year accelerated LLB program.
Excellent. And how many people were on that program with you? How many Canadians? Just a rough
Oh, that's a tough question. Maybe 30 in my year, I want to say. There was like a small amount, but like a decent amount that, we were represented at the university.
Excellent. I think they've tripled their number since then over the past few years. Yeah, because that's one of the most popular programs. Okay, we have a few questions. Awesome. So the first one here is, how many articling positions did you take? And it would be good to talk about your particular experience in finding articling.
So to qualify that, you can only take one articling position. So maybe if that person wants to clarify what you're getting at. yeah, maybe we'll circle back to that one if that's okay.
Okay,
I see the next question. Yeah, we'll circle back to this one because I had one articling position that I did here back in Ontario, but I'm sure we'll get into that. I think it's better if we go along the process here.
Sounds good. Okay, so do we want to skip to the Ncaa process?
Yeah, we'll do the Ncaa process. All right, so there's a couple questions here. So when did I start? How many did I write? So I graduated in 2014, so it would have been in, I think, June of 2014. The Ncaa exams sit 4 times a year, and the first sitting for the exam, I believe, was in August. After you graduate, you have to submit an application to the Ncaa. You have to send your transcripts to the Ncaa. So that process does take a little bit of time. So the first sitting that I could actually write in wasn't until October. So I started my first round in October. I had 7 exams to write in total, the 5 core and then 2 optional ones. For me, my optional ones, I took evidence and corporate because I did not take those courses when I went to the University of Kent. So I know a lot of the times, or at least at Kent, they will try and place Canadian students in those 2 courses during their program so that way you don't have to write those exams when you get back. You then may have an option of writing family, civil, I don't know, there's a range of them. But in any event, I was not interested in doing corporate or evidence, so I chose to do the NCAs for those. And in addition to that, I didn't even want to write those NCA exams, so I opted to do a single course enrollment through Osgoode University in Toronto. So I ended up self-studying and taking prep courses for the 5 core NCA exams. And then I did single course enrollment for the 2 optional ones, being evidence and corporate. So the entire process altogether, I started in October of 2014 and I finished October of 2015. So it took me a full year to complete the NCA process.
Can you share a bit about how you enrolled in those single enrollment courses? How did that work out and what was the timeline for enrollment?
Yeah, so trying to jog my memory here. I know that I had reached out. If you go to like the Osgoode PD website, they have a specific tab for single course enrollment, and they will only allow you to enroll up to a certain number of credits before you have to take a program. So it is a more expensive route to go that way, but I was very adamant I didn't want to write the exams. So I just paid for it and away I went. So yeah, as far as I know, I just contacted them and said, hey, can I do single course enrollment for these 2 courses? They were like, yep, here's the fee, away you go. So I think I took them, they were like back-to-back semesters when I did them.
Excellent, okay. So someone has asked, what is the Ncaa exam? So I think we can just say that that's the accreditation process to transfer your degree to Canada. So you do have to make up some equivalencies between the UK system and the Canadian system before they will allow you to do the bar exams. So I think just in basic terms, that's accreditation. We have more information on our website, and you can also ask your advisor for more information about the Ncaa process, and then they can give you more information about the challenge exams. But I think Katie's been pretty good about explaining how that process works and the fact that there are self-study options, but there's also single course enrollment options at universities, and there are LLM programs that can replace that as well. Now, did you consider enrolling in one of those LLMs?
So I did. When I was still at Kent in my second year looking to graduate, there were other students that were looking at the LLM program in Canadian common law. At the time, and I'm sure it's still now, UBC and Osgoode are the only 2 universities that offer that program. Now, my thing with that program was if you take it, I think it was like 20,000 or more to complete the
30.
program. 30, there you go, $30,000 to do that program. And at the end of the day, you are walking away with an LLM in Canadian common law. And you have to ask yourself, like, what are you going to do with an LLM in Canadian common law? Because you're not going to do anything with it. Like, you're going to spend $30,000 just to do your Ncaa exams when you could spend far less. I think, like, with my single course enrollment, I think I spent about $15,000 to do my Ncaas, but my single course enrollment made up about half of that. So, I mean, you can do Ncaas on the cheap for sure. I also did prep courses through Osgood, which contributed to that cost. So, I mean, you can really do your Ncaas on the cheap if you want to. With the LLM in Canadian common law, it's not going to give you a leg up in terms of getting a job as a lawyer. If you're adamant in getting an LLM, then my stance on that is do an LLM in an area of law that interests you. And while you do that program, you can opt to take courses which will exempt you from the Ncaa exams. So as an example, I had a friend who also graduated from Kent. She ended up doing an LLM in business law through U of T, cost her like $9,000. And she was exempt from, I think, 5 of her Ncaa. So she only had to write 2 at the end of the day. So,
yeah, that is excellent advice, because what the Ncaa is looking for is a formalized completion of the specific course content. So if you're taking that course content in an enrolled course at a Canadian law school, then there is a high chance, we can't guarantee, but there's a high chance it will exempt you from writing that exam. So what you have to do is contact the Ncaa and say, hey, I'm doing this program. Will you consider my credits from these classes? And send them the list of classes you're taking. And they will say, if you hit a 55% minimum, or whatever the minimum is for that school, and you complete these courses, we will take off your exams. And then all you have to do is go through the program, complete them with a good GPA, and hand in your transcript to the Ncaa. So that's kind of how that works, which is why single enrollment is good. Also why these LLMs are exempting you from the Ncaa exams, because those LLMs are essentially the first year of a Canadian JD, which is the content that they're asking you to complete through the Ncaa exams. That's why it all kind of wraps up together. So the important thing to keep in mind is budget. How much are you willing to spend on your accreditation? Timeline. What is your ideal timeline for completing these exams? Then maybe add 6 months to that to be realistic. And then look at what your end goal is. So like Katie mentioned, doing a LLM in a specific area of law that interests you is going to further your career more than doing an LLM that just covers the Canadian-based content. So all of those things to keep in mind. And I hope that answers, there were a few more questions about single enrollment and exemption from exams. So I hope that answers those questions. If there's any specific things that we didn't cover as part of that, then do ask the question again so we can make sure we cover it. But I think that covers Ncaas pretty thoroughly. Content is listed on our website and on the Ncaa website, and your advisor can always send you that list as well. We can also send you the links to the LLM programs if you're interested. So what shall we move on to now? Shall we talk about your experience of the LLB and how that compares or prepares you for practicing in Canada?
Sorry, can you say that again? My
LLB. So there is a question about, do you think your degree from the UK is comparable to the one you would receive in Canada? And how did employers view it? So do you think your LLB prepared you for practicing in Canada?
Yeah, so this is a question that a lot of prospective students have, a lot. And it depends. So, I mean, when I came back, I had volunteered at 2 different places, a law firm to gain some experience, and the Catholic Children's Aid Society in Hamilton in their legal department. Neither one of those places questioned my UK law degree. And then when I applied for articling, which I'm sure we'll get into, I was very specific with the type of firm that I wanted to apply to and where I applied to. And I'll preface all of this by saying that I don't have any connections in the field. I don't have any lawyers in my family. I don't have any friends who are lawyers. I was completely on my own with this experience from start to finish. So with my articling yeah, I'm a bit of an oddball because I applied to one position and I got that one position. And the person that I ended up articling for, she also had a foreign law degree. So it didn't come up in our conversations. And then when it was time to get my real job, because my articling position did not turn into a full-time job, hooray for me, I interviewed at a number of different places, and I would say out of maybe like the 10 that I interviewed at, only one maybe brought it up. And I think it comes from a place of they're not up with the times. You know, they're stuck in the old ways. They are old lawyers who just can't see the benefit in this type of degree. And quite honestly, you don't want to work for somebody like that. My current employer, or my previous employer, because I just changed jobs, she didn't bring up my law degree at all. And, you know, she didn't ask for transcripts, nothing. Like, at the end of the day, you want to have a stellar cover letter and resume. You want to sell yourself. You want to have some experience under your belt, and no one's going to question it. So did my law degree hinder me in any way? No, it didn't. Did it prepare me? To a certain extent, because I mean, I would say that once you're practicing as a lawyer, a lot of your, like, what you do day to day will come from your articling experience and just on the job training. So, I mean, yes, it'll prepare you from like a legal perspective, but in terms of practicing, it'll come with time. So I wouldn't place too much emphasis on, you know, where your degree is from. I mean, if you're gone through the Ncaa process, you're qualified. So, yeah.
No, that's great advice. And I'm glad to hear that you didn't hit a whole bunch of roadblocks when looking for articling, because that's one of the stigmas that we have everywhere when people are talking about international law degrees. And it's good to know from personal experience that you've gone through that there weren't those blocks to you looking for a job. So I think this is a good time to clarify what is articling and what is work experience. So can we draw a line between those two? Because I think that would help with some of these questions, because we have the question of how many articling positions, and then he's followed up asking, most people do 3, or what is that? So can we put a definition on articling?
Absolutely. So after you're done your NCAs, you have to apply to the lawyer licensing process. Now, currently in Ontario, the lawyer licensing process requires you to either do 10 months worth of articling with a firm, or the LPP program, which is offered through Ryerson University or the University of Ottawa, if I'm not mistaken. And additionally, you have to write and pass the barrister and solicitor exams. So articling is your 10-month job placement that you have to do as part of that lawyer licensing process. I think what people might be getting confused here is a lot of the times when students go through a Canadian program, they will do like a summer program, like a summer internship with a firm. So obviously, if you're going to a UK school, you're not going to be doing summer internships in the UK unless you're like looking to stay there. And then you may be looking to come back and get a summer position in between your years, right? Those positions are extremely hard to get. I mean, if you can swing it, all the power to you. My opinion, don't waste your time. I just don't think it's worth it. Like, if you're going to do a 2-year LLB program, just enjoy your summer and don't worry about gaining that experience during your summer off and stressing yourself out. Because I mean, the Canadian schools send recruiters and the firms, and they have in-house interviews, and they line these students up for these summer positions. And then, you know, that eventually like bridges them over to like their articling position that they're going to get. That's why if you're looking to article at like a big Toronto firm, let's say, like, it's going to be really competitive to try and get into a firm like that, just by virtue of how the cards are stacked. So, I mean, in terms of defining like articling versus other experiences, obviously articling is part of the lawyer licensing process. Other experiences are something that you may seek out, whether it's through a summer internship or volunteer work, which, you don't have to do, but in my opinion, getting some kind of volunteer experience under your belt is the best thing that you can do to boost your resume. So to give you some examples as to what I did when I was at law school at the University of Kent, I volunteered with a family lawyer in Kent, like in the local area. So I would go there and help her out every now and then to add to my resume. Kent also has the law clinic there, which you can gain some experience to put on your resume as well, working on real files. And then when I came back and I was doing my Ncaa process, that is a great opportunity, especially if you're not working and you have like the financial backing of your parents, let's say, or somebody to help you out. You take the time to study for your exams and go and get volunteer experience. So it was during that year that I was able to volunteer with the one law firm, and then also volunteering at the legal department at the Catholic Children's Aid Society in Hamilton. So I feel like those experiences helped give me that push and something to talk about as well when I crafted my cover letter to then apply for my articling position. And then obviously with my articling position, that then gave more experience to then apply for my job. So the other thing I would also point out is if you're looking to volunteer, I would try and be very deliberate on what kind of volunteer experiences you're seeking out. So in my case, I knew from very early on before I even went to law school that I wanted to practice in the area of family law. And so I specifically sought out opportunities to practice with a family law lawyer or volunteer at a family law firm or volunteer at CAS. So all of these things cumulative, on a resume or a cover letter look really good to a future employer to say, I have experience in this area of law. This is what I want to do. My passion is leaping off the page. So, if you have any idea of what it is that you want to do in practice, start thinking about it now, like going into law school or while you're in it. So,
yeah, I think that is excellent advice. And for those of you who don't know exactly what you want to do, or even think that you do know, getting experience gives you an idea of if that is the right situation for you. Because I've spoken to other students who went in and they thought they wanted to be a criminal lawyer. This was forefront in their minds. And then they went and did the justice project at Leeds, for example, and realized that they really did not like criminal law at all. And they ended up switching to something else like family or tax law. And I know one professor that we've worked with in the past, he was absolutely adamant he was going to do tax law. That was his thing. And then when he went through law school, he found out how boring tax law is and decided he was going to do family, social, and especially LGBTQ law. And that's his specialization now. So through experience, volunteering or these little work placements, job shadowing, basically any way you can get your foot in the door will give you more opportunity to develop your own understanding of what you want to do with your career. And Katie, you're really lucky in that you already knew what you wanted to do, and that ended up being your path, and you were able to build that. But not everybody has that experience. Some of you may just know you like law, but what's next? These pro bono opportunities at the universities, like Katie mentioned, the law clinic at Kent, a lot of the universities have experiences like that you may not be aware of. So ask your advisor about what pro bono or volunteer opportunities are available at the universities you're considering to make sure that those fit with what you're interested in, because they all have a different perspective, and we want to make sure that you find a university that suits your interests. Awesome. Okay, so that talks a bit about articling. I hope that clarifies what articling is and what job opportunities are. We do have a couple questions about timelines. So can we delineate a timeline between when you graduated and when you started working? So pass the bar and all of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, so I graduated University of Kent in 2014, and I was called to the bar in June of 2017. So it took me about 3 years to complete the process.
Yeah, and did you start working full-time right away? You had a job lined up once you graduated, or once you finished your exams?
So when I finished the lawyer licensing process, then yes, I did. So my articling, it was kind of close. So I finished my articling position in I want to say January of 2017. And so I just missed the January call. And so your next call isn't until June. So I used that time to then figure out like, okay, where am I going to apply? And I ended up interviewing like right before, I want to say like maybe from like February, I started interviewing to kind of line something up. And I got hired on in May, and my employer signed a supervision agreement for a month, which basically is kind of like an extension of articling. So she supervised me for a month. And then, so even though I was hired on, like I couldn't start practicing as a lawyer until I got called to the bar. So.
Okay, that's an excellent way to do it. So then you'd say it was about 3.5 years, 4 years before you were practicing officially with a license.
No, I was officially practicing with a license in June of 2017. And
so 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
3 years.
I mean, it was probably a little bit less than 3 years, but yeah, 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So that would be probably on the longer end of how long it usually takes people. So depending on how many Ncaa exams you have to write, you can typically get those done in 6 to 12 months. And then, like Katie mentioned, there's particular times of year you can be called to the bar. So depending on when you complete the solicitor and barrister exams and complete your articling. So all of that kind of determines your timeline. But I would say probably 2 to 3 years is a good timeline to consider to getting a full-time job with your license.
Yeah, and I mean, some people can certainly do it a lot faster. Like it depends on your circumstances, you know, and how quickly can you have articling lined up, or are you doing the LPP program? How quickly, you know, can you get your Ncas done? Like it's an individual thing, and it's difficult to compare yourself to other people. Like just you'll get there like when you get there. So
yeah, absolutely. I think it's important to note as well that there is no strict timeline for doing these options. You have up to 5 years to write all your Ncas. So if life gets in the way, you decide to get married and have a couple kids in between, then that is totally doable. You just have to keep in mind what your goals are and determine your timeline based on your goals, and then strive for those goals and see what happens, because, you know, life throws curveballs like coronavirus, where I don't think many people are getting articling right now because the firms aren't really operating to full capacity right now. So yeah, life happens and you just have to be patient, but keep in mind what the steps are in the process and then figure out what your ideal timeline is. Okay, so that covers approach to the bar. Let's see what else we've got. We've covered articling. Okay, we have a great one from a student here. I'm from Toronto and applying to law school for September 2020, but I've never been to the UK. I'm wondering how you knew which university to choose. And the student is looking at Kent, Leeds, and Birmingham. And they're used to city life. Okay, they want to live in a similar area. So I think your advisor can talk a bit about the difference between a Canadian city and a UK city, because there is a big difference. But Katie, I'm interested in your perspective on how you chose your university and why.
So yeah, I don't know. There was a lot of considerations. I applied to 5 different schools, as I'm sure everybody has done that. I got into 4 out of the 5 that I applied to. And I think the one thing that pushed me over the edge with the University of Kent is that they hosted a like an alumni thing in Toronto. They do it every single year. I think they do it in like March or May. I'm not sure. But in any event, it was an opportunity for some of the professors to come down, some alumni, you know, like myself now, who then showed up that are practicing lawyers. So I went to this event and I was able to talk to people who have gone through the process. And I think, you know, that kind of solidified my choice to go to that school because I was able to talk to someone. I mean, what CLFA is now is not what CLFA was when I went through the CLFA process. And so I didn't have the opportunity to connect with all of the schools that I had applied to in the same way that you guys have that opportunity now, I would say. And so I would think that, you know, it was that one experience of having that interaction with Kent, and being able to talk to an alumni who was a practicing lawyer, made me decide to go to that school. So I won't touch on any of my thoughts on some of the other schools. I'll leave that in your hands, Heidi. But I will say one thing: Birmingham has thick accents.
Oh, they do, but nothing in comparison to when you get up north in like Durham or Edinburgh area. Then it's just a whole nother language altogether.
Yes. So you may want to consider that.
Yeah, I would say when looking at a campus environment, we've already talked about looking for the extracurricular experience, and Katie's touched on the importance of making that personal connection. And we are offering webinars. We've offered a few over the past few weeks, and we're offering a few more with the university reps. So I highly recommend, if you can attend those webinars, to get in touch with us and make sure that you're making it to those sessions, because that is our current equivalent of these kind of alumni networking sessions that we would normally be doing in person in Toronto and Vancouver. But of course, it's not possible right now. Nobody can travel. So join our webinars. If you do want to get in touch with anybody in particular and ask your questions, we can make those connections for you. But when looking at different campus environments and city environments, you want to consider the size of the city and the opportunities. So do they have the stores that you want to shop at? Do they have the extracurricular activities you want to do, like sports teams and things like that? Because we do have a few universities that have hockey teams, surprisingly. What did I look for? I looked for a dance sport team because I was heavily into ballroom dancing at the time that I went overseas. So find that thing that you know you need to have. Do they have an Olympics level gym or athletic complex where you can do your stress relief activities, right? So thinking about all those aspects that go into choosing the place that you're going to be living for the next 2 or 3 years, because that is essentially it. You're moving your life overseas. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable and happy there. And it's not all about the university, it's about the city life as well. So just to clarify, Canadian city versus UK city, it is a very, very different definition. There is nothing in comparison to Toronto in the UK. I wouldn't even say that London compares to Toronto. Very different feeling, very different scenario. The advisors can give their feedback to you as well. Just chat with your advisor about their feelings, because most of them have traveled quite extensively in the UK and will be able to comment on your choices. But yeah, it's about looking for those different categories that really make you feel comfortable with your decision, and then doing a pros and cons list. Yeah, love pros and cons list. Yeah, they're great. They're great. Okay, all right, where else can we go here? So the next question here, can you take an articling position while you're preparing for the Ncaa exams? That is a great question.
Yes.
And the
answer is a hard no. No, you cannot. So you can line up your articling position, but you cannot start your articling position until after you've received your certificate of qualification from the Ncaa. So in my experience, I did not start applying to articling positions until after I had that certificate in hand. And the reason why I did that is because if you fail an Ncaa exam, you can only write them in certain sessions, especially if it's an optional one. So the optional ones may not be offered in every single session. They may be offered in alternate sessions. So you want to make sure that you don't jeopardize your articling position by lining it up, failing an exam, and then not being able to start by the time you're supposed to start. So
no, that is great advice, because we know that if you fail one, you have to most often wait 2 sittings to rewrite it, just because of the timeline for getting your results. So you won't know until the deadline for the next session registration is passed if you have passed the previous set of exams. Is the way it works. So you're essentially adding 6 months to your writing timeline if you fail, which makes it extremely important to understand yourself and your own studying habits, because if you can't handle 4 exams in one sitting, you probably shouldn't be signing up for 4 exams in one sitting. So think about how much you can handle for study time, make a schedule, set yourself up to be successful rather than to fail. So don't overload yourself, would be the main thing. And the recommendation would be what, 2 exams per sitting?
That's what I did, was 2 exams per sitting, yeah.
Yeah, and we have had other people who worked with us, other alumni, complete 4 or 5 in one sitting, but they did nothing else. Nothing. They were studying full tilt and they were super stressed the entire time. So again, consider what you can handle and factor that into your timeline.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next question. Did you intern in Canada or the UK or both?
So the short answer to that is no, I didn't. While I was at Kent, I did volunteer with a family law lawyer in Deal, which was a neighboring town or whatever to Canterbury. So that added to my experience. It was unpaid, it was just volunteer. And then as I was doing my NCAs back in Ontario, I then volunteered, again, no pay, with a law firm in Burlington, and also CIS in Hamilton, their legal department. So you can call it an intern if that's what you want, but it was volunteer, unpaid. It was just to get experience.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of positions are very much like that. I think you would agree that stuff out there is pretty much unpaid volunteer until you have your license, unfortunately. Even some articling is currently unpaid. However, there is a movement now to make all articling mandatory paid, which will likely mean that there will be fewer articling positions available. So something to be aware of. If they have to pay the students coming in, they'll have fewer spots available, unfortunately. So things to think about would be the LPP program in comparison to getting a traditional articling position. And at this point, we just don't know what articling is going to look like in 2 to 3 years' time. It could change drastically. I mean, it hasn't changed much in the past 200 years. I think you would agree. Yep. But with COVID happening, there will be necessary changes to the way that the licensing process works and everything that follows that. So it's a watch this space sort of scenario, and all of this is just hypothetical based on previous experience.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So another question. We've covered part of this, basically the timeline and how long it took you to find a job. But you mentioned you work in Barrie. Ideally, I would like to work back in Toronto, hopefully downtown. So I wanted to know, is it harder to find a job in the busier cities, such as downtown, than it is in more secluded places like Barrie?
I'll probably say yes to this question. Obviously, there's a lot of competition in Toronto. I don't have any experience with it whatsoever, though. When I came back and started looking for jobs, I'm originally from Hamilton. I had no desire to work in Toronto. I did not want to commute to Toronto. I didn't want to live in Toronto. I did not want the Suits life. If any of you watch that show, like I did not want to be working from like 7 a.m. until 11 o'clock at night. Like that is not work-life balance. That is not what I wanted. And yes, you may get paid a lot of money to work downtown Toronto, but they're going to want you to bill a crazy amount of hours. And it just, I didn't want that. So I completely stayed away from Toronto firms. I didn't apply for articling positions in Toronto. And if you're looking to article in Toronto, you actually have to apply like a year in advance, I think, because they do their recruiting a year in advance. And they usually do it through the Canadian law schools. So again, you're placed at a disadvantage if you're trying to go like through that route to get an articling position in Toronto. So I I was very specific in where I wanted to apply. I wanted something because I had a passion for family law. I wanted a firm that did exclusively family law. I wanted a small firm. I wanted mentorship, which is a huge thing, especially for, an articling student or like an incoming, like new call. It's invaluable to have mentorship if you can find a firm that will offer that to you. And I can say from my experience that you can work at a small firm in Barrie, like I did, and earn what the guys in Toronto are making with far less work. So it is possible.
Yeah, and it's all about being aware of what your goals are. So we do have a few other alumni who have gotten onto those Bay Street firms, and they have talked about how difficult and challenging it was, but they persevered and they made it there. So articling is, of course, going to be a challenge because Bay Street has that old boys agreement with Osgood. So there's always going to be that first level of graduates from Osgood that are the first picks for those Bay Street firms. It's not impossible. It's just more challenging because you're not in that particular category. So we have had students speak about going through the LLM, the Masters in Common Law at Osgoode, and getting access to that route through the back door, because then you have access to the Careers Center at Osgoode, which gives you openings there. So there's different ways to do it. You just have to be aware of your goals. And Katie, you already knew you wanted a smaller firm. You didn't want the rat race lifestyle. So you chose well for your particular goals. And there are people who choose a specific firm, and that is the only firm they want to aim for. That is your choice. If that is your end goal, by all means, go and run for it and do whatever you can to get there. There are other people who are a bit more lenient about finding articling to get through the purpose of articling, and then looking for job opportunities when they come up. So being more open to different possibilities, which is something else to consider.
Yeah, I would also add too, like if you're really honed in on a Toronto firm or just in that area in general, the OBA, which is the Ontario Bar Association, hosts a ton of different events. You can get an OBA membership for like nothing, or like $5 or something. They have like a student membership rate. I'm not sure what it currently is, but in any event, they have like a student division executive branch where they host like in-person networking events. You can go to different programs like at a reduced cost. And a lot of the times, like the panel speakers are lawyers who work at these big firms in Toronto. So use it as an opportunity, like while you're in law school, like home for the summer, whatever, even before like you're going into law school, during your Ncaa process, go to those OBA events and take advantage of that, because you want to build your network. And I would also recommend, because I did do this when I was on the search for articling positions as well, is I made myself a little business card that had my name on it, my phone number, my email, what my current status was, whether I like an Ncaa student, what I was looking for. So that way, when you are at these networking events, you can hand these cards out to people. And I only did that after I had an experience where I was at a roundtable discussion at one of these events, and I recognized one of the lawyers, and he was like, "Yeah, do you have a card?" And I was like, "No, I don't have a card." So, you know, you feel lost in that situation. So prepare yourself, but yeah, build your network.
No, that's excellent. Excellent. And the OBA, Ontario Bar Association, there are equivalents in other provinces. So just choose your province and make sure you're connecting with the provincial body, because you do have to go through this process in the province where you want to license. So you want to be making connections with people within the province where you want to practice, essentially. And there are those opportunities, like Katie said, as a student. It's a cheap membership. You get access to their mailing list, to their contacts, to their events, networking events especially. So hone your networking skills, make up your little business cards, have a marketing strategy for yourself that includes your resume and your cover letter and all of that. And make sure you're putting yourself out there. It's really important.
And I mean, even getting involved too. So like I sat on the student division executive of the OBA while I was doing my articling. So the student division executive has a representative from every single Canadian law school or I guess through the OBA, like Ontario law schools. They have a representative from each law school there. And then they have a seat open for an articling rep. So, I mean, when I came onto that executive, I think I was one of the first students who had ever gone through the Ncaa process and kind of opened these doors for them in terms of membership and prospective students. So, I mean, if you're able to get on the executive, I mean, it's a great boost to your resume. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a lot of our universities now have events during the winter season where they host presentations from organizations like the OBA to get you in touch with this information as well. So this won't be the last time you're hearing about it. If you decide to go through law school, we do have connections with the UK law schools now to this information. But definitely good to keep in mind when you're thinking about developing your career path. Okay, so we have a question. What is a LLM? Just strictly, an LLM is a master's in law. It is not a qualifying law degree. It is kind of your plus law knowledge. So you want to specialize in an area of law, you do that at the LLM level. And there's a full range of LLMs in the UK. If you have a specific area of law you're interested in, you could do something as simple as family law, or you can look at international business and finance law, sports law, fashion law. There's a whole range of them. So talk to your advisor if that is of interest, but keep in mind that is not your qualifying law degree. You want to do an LLB to practice.
Yeah, and I will just add a caveat to that. So if you do an LLM in a specialization, and then let's say I did an LLM in family law, and then I went and practiced family law, I could not advertise on my website that I have a specialization in family law because that is a different designation through the Law Society. So you just gotta note that little tidbit, I guess.
Yeah.
You have to be practicing for like 10 years before you can get that specialization designation.
Good to know. It's all about marketing, right?
Yeah.
That's helpful. Okay, so we have a question. As a mature student, can you describe how much pressure you had to handle during your program?
Like at Kent, I'm assuming. So
yeah.
I wouldn't consider myself a mature student. I had done like my 4 years undergrad and then gone there to do the 2-year LLB program. So pretty much every single student in the program was in the exact same boat as me. Like we were all the same age. We were at the same life stage. There's maybe 2 people in my program who were older, who were probably in like their mid 40s and had families. So I wouldn't consider myself a mature student in that regard. If you're comparing yourself to like, let's say you're doing the 3-year LLB program where you're grouped in with UK law students who have gone straight out of high school, then yeah, there's a bit of a difference there. But I would say like in my experience at Kent, I think they've mixed it up now since I've been there. But when I was there, they kept the Canadian students very separate from the rest of the students. So all of our seminars were just the Canadian students. I mean, the lectures were mixed, but I didn't really have any interaction with those students unless I was involved in like the Kent Student Law Society or something like that. So, I mean, it is what it is. You're just going there, get your degree and move on.
Yeah, I think it is very important to note that the senior status students are always going to be considered mature students for a bachelor's program, but they are not mature students in the context of the senior status program because they're all university graduates. So the age range is probably from age 22 all the way up through, I've sent people that are in their 60s.
Yeah, someone just asked how old was I when I went to law school in the UK. So I would have been 24 when I went. No, that's wrong. 22.
22.
22.
Yeah. If you
and then
went straight out of your 4-year.
That's right, 22. Yeah.
So that would be, I would say the average age range we see for the senior status is anywhere from 22 to 30. And then there's a few outliers that are on the older end of the spectrum. There wouldn't be anybody younger than that going for the senior status. And for teaching purposes, universities vary on how they treat their senior status. So some lump you together in lectures with all of the LLB students. So like you do constitutional law, criminal law, kind of your basic first year courses with the 3-year LLB students. But then for smaller groups like seminars and tutorials, you are only with the senior status students. So universities will treat that differently depending on how they teach the program, but that is the general way that we see at least our partner universities treat these programs. So yes, important to note that you're not technically a mature student, although that does come into play with accommodation. So if you're concerned about accommodation, which is something to consider this time of year, have a chat with your advisor about the university you're going to, because there's different agreements we have with different universities about placing you in accommodation that will work out for you as a more mature individual versus an 18-year-old. Okay, so that's what I'll say about mature students. All right, so what specific courses do the Ncaa look for? So we've got the basic 5. Do you remember them, Katie?
Oh my gosh. Foundations, professional responsibility, administrative law, constitutional law, and criminal law. Those are the 5 core. Yes.
Excellent.
My knowledge here.
Yes, and those are all Canadian material modules. So you will have done the equivalents of those in common law in the UK system. You're just applying the Canadian case law, essentially, when it looks at the Ncaa exams. And then for your extra 2, you chose evidence and
business. Like corporate. Yeah.
Yeah. So you were given 4 choices though, I assume?
No, so I had to do those 2.
Oh, I see, because you hadn't taken them. Okay.
That's right.
So typically you will take a core set of courses in your LLB, and then you'll be required to choose 2 out of an elective list for your extra 2 if you do a 2-year LLB. So that can be almost anything. There's a list of 9 or 10 of them that the Ncaa provides on their guidelines, and they'll give you a choice of 4, and then you choose 2 out of that 4. So my recommendation is always to take the stuff that you dread the most in the UK system in a classroom setting, and then write the exams in the easy stuff. So up to you what that is. For me, I would be taking tax law because I hate numbers, and then I'd be doing something like family law or something equivalent in my exam.
Yeah, I definitely would not be taking tax law in the UK. 100% not. Tax law is definitely an optional Ncaa exam, so don't write tax law. Don't do it.
I was using it as an example, but yes, I would agree to never take tax law ever. It's the first thing that popped into my head. Stuff like land law is required, evidence is required. So those are kind of core within the programs, right? So yes, check out the Ncaa guidelines. If you don't know where to find them, we have them on file. So ask your advisor and we can send that PDF on to you. But it's all available on the Ncaa website. And stay tuned for changes in the Ncaa process with COVID and all of that in mind as well. So, okay, let's see. So we've got another one. Does an LLB put you at a disadvantage as opposed to someone who completed their JD?
No, it's exactly the same. Exactly
there you go. They're both qualifying law degrees in common law.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the disadvantage would be if a firm is dead set on hiring from a specific Canadian law school with that old boys agreement between Osgoode and Bay Street. But no, there isn't any disadvantage to taking a degree overseas. And in fact, I would argue the opposite, that you have more extensive experience and opportunity going overseas than you do staying in Canada. Would you agree, Katie?
Absolutely.
Yeah, awesome. Okay. Can you explain the process of what happens after the 3 years or 2 years in your case of law school? Basically the whole process after you return to Canada. So we've gone through this this person may have joined us a little bit later. So basically they're asking, start at graduation and go through that step by step.
Yeah, so in a nutshell, that process is you finish law school, you do your NCAs, you do the lawyer licensing process, which is your articling and bar exams. And then once you get called to the bar, then you can practice as a lawyer. So that's it in a nutshell, really.
Yeah, excellent. And that can take anywhere from 2 to 3 years on average or longer, depending on your own personal case. Important things to note, you have to send your transcript directly from the university to the Ncaa to be considered for assessment. So you have to pay them for assessment before you can start those exams. Then you complete your exams on your own schedule, and those must be completed before starting articling, right? And then you can do articling and your bar exam simultaneously. Yeah, okay, perfect. That does vary by province. So check out the licensing process in your province because they're not all exactly the same. And there has been discussion of putting basically bookend exams on the Ontario process. So one exam, then your articling, then the second exam. So stay tuned for changes in that process. But currently, you can do the exams when you are prepared to do the exams and do your articling whenever you can secure articling for 8 to 10 months, depending on your personal experience. And then once that's completed, you can pick a time to be called to the bar. Sound about right?
Yep.
Okay, awesome. We've covered that question. Can you transfer back to a Canadian law school after completing your first year at an international school? Is it common or rare, and do you need to complete the LSAT to do so? Okay, so this one's probably outside of your experience, Katie.
Yeah, that's for you.
Yeah. We have known a few people to be able to do this. So I know some at Bennett Gassel in Barrie, for example. There's a few students that I've met at networking sessions that have done this, where they've transferred their first or even 2 years of international studies from either a UK or an Australian university to a Canadian law school. The answer is yes, you have to write the LSAT. That is still a requirement to get into a Canadian law school. They have to recognize your credits, so you need to have excellent grades to be able to do this. And there are certain schools that are more open to transfer than others. So the schools that I know have accepted transfer students are Queen's, Windsor, and Western. So keep that in mind if this is your goal. I would not make it your primary goal to transfer because there's no guarantee. But if for whatever reason you decide this is the best route, it's not impossible. It is possible to do, but make sure you write the LSAT and do well on it and do the best you can in your UK studies, but you have a good chance of transferring back. So that's about all I can say about that. I would also look at getting in touch with other alumni, look at a few firms that you're interested in working at, see where they're at, and have a chat with people there. Okay, how long was law school in the UK? What was the workload like? That's a good one.
It's a good one. I would say it was comparable to my undergrad experience. It was very, very much a transition from my undergrad. It wasn't more work, it wasn't less work. I can say that, like, comparing my experience to that of someone who has gone to a Canadian school, because I do have a friend who went to a Canadian school, she talked about experiences where, I don't know, like the reading is so much and like the professor will put you on the spot and things like that. I didn't have any of those experiences when I was at Kent. Like I said, it was very much an extension of my undergrad. So it was manageable. And so I would say that if you're going into the 3-year program straight from high school, it would be the same growing pains as just going into a regular undergrad program.
Yeah. What would you say were there extreme differences, I should put it that way, between the style of teaching and learning that you used in your undergraduate, it was a Mcmaster, and Kent?
No, it was exactly the same because we had our lectures and then we had our seminars or tutorials. So format was exactly the same. Growing pains, I don't know, professors with accents from Scotland that you can't understand. Like, how am I supposed to, do this material? I don't know. Other big things were some courses were very heavily weighted with the exam. They are, at Kent at least, they were closed book exams. I do know some schools or Canadian schools will do open book exams. Your Ncaa exams will be open book exams. And I mean, taking an open book exam is a skill that you're going to have to learn. But in terms of, the weighting, I mean, for me personally, I did better with coursework over like a big, like 80 or 90% exam. That would be my preference, is to do the coursework. And at Kent, they offered us in some classes to do like a dissertation or something, like a big essay, as opposed to writing the exam. So I did opt for that in some courses. So, I mean, that would be different than perhaps like my experience at Mcmaster, but yeah.
Yeah, I would identify that as the biggest difference, that and the grading system. But it's important to note that they have fewer instances of assessment, we'll put it that way, in the UK system than they do in the typical Canadian. Because I know in my background, I would have typically 2 midterms with a written project in between, and then a big project presentation, and then a final exam. So that's about 6 points of assessment for one course. Whereas in the UK, they might have 2 that are graded assessments. And that would include a final exam and a paper or a presentation, depending on the type of course. So important to keep that in mind. There's also variation amongst the universities. So if 100% exams absolutely terrify you, talk to your advisor about which schools you want to take off your list, because there are a few schools that absolutely require 100% exams.
Yep.
Yeah. So, and the grading system, was that a shock to you? Because it's quite different.
So I knew about the grading system before I went. And at Kent, in our very first week, they got all the Canadian students together and they sat us down and they gave us a PowerPoint presentation. And they're like, so here's our grading system. Don't come crying to me when you get a 60 on an essay. So we were really prepped for that, so it wasn't a problem. And then in terms of like coming back as well, because depending on like when you're applying for articling, some firms, the bigger ones, might ask for transcripts. And that's a pretty scary thing if they see a 60 or a 65 on your transcript. So the University of Kent wrote us a letter that explained that grading system that we could hand in like with our applications to explain it all. So
yeah, that's great. And most of the universities we work with have an equivalent of that as well. So it's good to note that that is something you want to ask for if it's not automatically given to you as a Canadian. Yep. Awesome. Okay. What degree did you take in law school? We'll say it was a senior status LLB, so 2-year LLB. Quick and easy. Can I ask why you chose to go to the UK rather than staying in Canada?
So when I applied, I was still in my 4th year at Mcmaster, and it was my first semester. And to apply to the UK schools, I think I paid like $35 Canadian to apply to 5 UK schools. It required 1 application to all 5 schools. It was super simple and it was cheap. The Canadian schools, on the other hand, their application process was a little bit later in the year. And it was like $100 per application, I want to say, maybe a little bit more. And it was different application for every school that you're applying to. So I was just like, okay, let me try and apply to the UK, see if anything happens. Because I had a family friend who had previously gone through it like the year before, and he got in. So, I mean, my full intention was to still apply to Canadian schools, but I was just going to apply to UK schools anyways. And I would say probably like 2 weeks after applying to the UK schools, like I started getting accepted. And the University of Kent in particular offered me like an unconditional offer. So meaning that I didn't have to maintain a certain grade point average in order to go to that school. I could just accept it and away I go. And so by January, when I was starting my next semester at Mcmaster, like, why was I going to spend all this money to apply to Canadian schools? It's a 3-year program. It's going to cost me X amount of dollars, where I could go to the UK where I was already accepted. I didn't have to maintain a certain grade point average. So it was a little bit, take the stress off. I had the opportunity to go abroad for 2 years, travel, and it was going to cost me like less than going to a Canadian school for 3 years. It was a no-brainer. So I took it. And I mean, I made sure I did all my research before I went to make sure that I was well-versed in the Ncaa process and the lawyer licensing process and all of these things that you guys are doing now. And yeah, it was a great experience, and I would do it again in a heartbeat. So.
Awesome. Yeah. All the reasons that you should go. She just told you all the reasons that you need to go to the UK. So yeah. There you go. Finish your application now, right this second. Okay. Next question. So this one's about Russell Group versus non-Russell Group universities. So do you think a Russell Group university provides a better education than a non-Russell Group? And just to clarify, Kent is a non-Russell Group university.
Yeah, I think the Russell Group ones are like Cambridge and Oxford and
yeah, so we have a few on our list. So those are Oxbridge. Russell Group is essentially a group of universities known for research, and they have to achieve a certain level of research standing across certain categories to maintain Russell Group status. So when it comes to Russell Group universities, there is a more theoretical base in their teaching versus practical base. So when we're looking at our group of universities in particular, I would say the Russell Group universities would be best for master's programs, because that's where you're actively doing research and where the research aspect comes into play in your particular degree. But for your LLB, did you have to hand in many research assignments or do a dissertation?
No, I think I did like 1 for 1 class. Yeah, I don't know. This is a difficult question to answer. I mean, that was not a consideration of mine. Obviously, I don't even know what it is. And I think that if you're using that as like a factor to determine which law school you're going to go to, because it might have some kind of like special standing back in your province to get you a job as a lawyer, like no one's going to know what that is. I didn't even know what that was. So, yeah, I would say to your point, like if you're looking at doing a master's, then sure, that might be a consideration. But for your undergrad, like, no.
Yeah. So when I think about this question, I think about looking at your particular style of learning. So are you a more practical learner? Or are you more theoretical learner? Because those Russell Group universities teach in a more theoretical setting, whereas, well, typically in comparison with non-Russell Group, you're getting a more practical based education. So think about how you learn and where you will do best, because what you really want to do is get really, really good grades. So if it's a more challenging program, like at a Russell Group university, if they have a higher GPA requirement, it's typically a more challenging program. Will that suit your style of learning and your success more than another university? So keep that in mind. Like I said, if you're doing research, so the LLM programs, Russell Group is a great way to go, but otherwise not as much a consideration. And the main exception to that would be the University of York with their problem-based learning program, because they are a Russell Group university, but their program is completely different. And if you're interested in practical-based teaching, talk to your advisor about York University's, or University of York, sorry, University of York's problem-based learning program. Okay, moving on to the next one. How many months do you get off during the year? So let's talk about holidays. This is a great opportunity to talk about traveling.
Yeah, so I think at Kent, I had the entire month of December off, or at least from like December to January, it was like a full month. And then I also had a full month off in, I want to say April, because they use that time to then study for your exams, which are then all stacked in May. And then once your exams are done, then potentially you could be coming home or like off by the end of May, and then June, July, August until mid-September or even the first week of October, depending on when your program starts. So lots of opportunity for traveling.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
I can give you some bad advice here, but I don't know if I should do that.
Some personal experience anecdotes, right?
Personal experience. Don't put your seminars on a Friday and then just take off for the weekend or a 4-day trip and go and travel. So,
yeah. I did the exact same thing. If you can take a 4-day weekend to Dublin or Paris, or even just trek down to London, it's totally worth it. Completely agree.
Absolutely.
Did you stay on campus at Kent, and were there night classes?
So I stayed on campus in my first year. It was not offered in the second year, so I had to move off campus in my second year. Were there night classes? I don't think so. I don't think I had any night classes. So, yeah.
What about tutorials?
Not at night. I don't recall any being at night. So.
Okay.
The thing with the classes too, like at Kent, I don't know if they still do, they probably do. All of our lectures were recorded at Kent. So like in my first year, like I went to all the lectures and went to all the seminars or tutorials. But in my second year, because I lived off campus, I didn't even go to class for the lectures. I just stayed home and like did it at my leisure because they were all recorded, and then just like went in for my seminars. So, I mean, that was a pretty cool perk of being there. I was doing it at my leisure.
Yeah, good to know. Always recommend going to class, though. Going to class is good.
Your tutorial.
What is your experience of family law like?
It's great, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of a very broad question.
Well, what do you like the best about family law, and does it live up to what your expectations were?
I would say so. I mean, I took a family law course when I was in law school. It was, I guess, like what I thought it was going to be. And then coming into practice, I dabbled in child protection for a little bit. And then, you know, I've done primarily family law since, you know, I got my first job. So for 3 years, been doing family law. I don't know. I think my path is probably different than other people, because I feel like in terms of long-term goals, like I don't see myself doing this for the rest of my life, and probably moving on to do something maybe policy related or big picture things. I'm not quite sure what my path will be, but I'm always looking for the next thing and how my path is going to guide me there. I mean, in terms of like the practice of law, I mean, yeah, you could hear some people complain that, family law is too emotional, or it's this or it's that. But I mean, like, that's what I like about family law. And I've always been attracted to family law because it has this sociological perspective that other areas of law don't have. So, I mean, you get to connect with your clients, and, when you resolve their family law issue, and it makes you feel good at the end of the day, where it's different than, I don't know, doing real estate where you're doing closings all the time, for an example. So yeah, I mean, I like my practice of law. I don't foresee myself like changing streams to do anything different, like criminal or personal injury or anything like that. Like, no, I don't have a passion to do anything else. If anything, like, I'll use this as a stepping stone to get me somewhere else that might interest me. But
Awesome. And you're planning on having a life in between and a family and everything. So it's good to keep your options open.
Yeah.
So we have a question about how much it cost you for your studies.
From law school to practicing, let's put it this way. I got an $80,000 line of credit from the bank to fund everything, totally maxed that out. And then my NCAs were probably another 15,000 on top of that, I want to say. And then you have your lawyer licensing fees as well, which my articling position basically funded me to do that. So my articling position, it wasn't unpaid, it was paid very little. So I only got paid $500 a month to article, and that $500 a month essentially covered my lawyer licensing fees. So at the end of the day, like, yeah, you're about 80,000-ish, a little bit more in debt, depending on the exchange rate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and actually the exchange rate's in your favor right now. Thank you, Brexit. So yeah, exchange rate's pretty good. What would you say your budget was? So Canterbury is about a medium expense town, I would say. What would you say your budget was per year for living, travel, tuition?
You're asking some tough questions, Heidi.
I'm not asking them. I'm getting them from the list.
I'm not much of a budgeter. I just kind of spend as I see fit, and I didn't deprive myself from any opportunities. Let's just put it that way. If I wanted to go somewhere, I went somewhere, and I didn't travel cheap, because me in a hostel, not going to happen. Never will happen. Me in a 5-star hotel, that will happen. So, I mean, yeah, I did have nice vacations when I did go and travel. I mean, the way I viewed it was, $80,000 loan, $40,000 per year. Also, I forgot to mention, I did get OSAP as well. I think I got about, I can't even remember. I think OSAP maxes out on how much they can give you. I think maybe I got 20,000 from OSAP, and maybe 5,000 was a bursary. So like 15,000 is like what I owed on it. So yeah, I mean, that's getting you up there. That's what, 95,000 plus your credit cards and whatever. So probably putting yourself at 100,000 at least to go and do it the way that I did it.
Yeah, but I would say, looking at Toronto in comparison, the University of Toronto is $38,000 per year for tuition, starting in last September. I haven't even looked at this coming September. Plus, living in downtown Toronto is going to cost you, I'd say, about 20 grand a year, right? Just for living expenses or even commuting. So you're about equivalent just going to one of the downtown universities in Toronto versus going overseas. So, and it's a shorter program as well. So keeping that in mind for budget. You mentioned OSAP, so it maxes out at $11,000 a year for most people, depending on how much you've taken out previously. So it's something to factor in. Other provinces will give more. So I know students have gotten full funding from Alberta and BC in the past. Again, personal experience really depends on your situation. So something else to keep in mind. And also your travel budget. So I know I budgeted $5,000 for my traveling because that was something that I really wanted to do when I was in the UK. And I spent more than that when I was traveling. But I did not travel cheap either. And I'm notorious for bringing home every souvenir I can possibly find. So anybody who's seen my teddy bear collection will know that I collect them from every single place I go. So that all adds up too. So think about your lifestyle and how you plan to live. So are you going to get a studio flat in central London while you're there, or are you going to live with 4 or 5 flatmates throughout the course of your study, right? All of that makes a big difference. And of course, your pub budget. You know, do you need to go for a pint every night, or can you buy groceries and cook at home? And if you don't know how to boil water, you might want to start learning how to do that now, because that's important.
Yeah, you have to be able to cook when you go there.
Yeah, cooking is good. The food is actually pretty good, and even for those of you that have eating restrictions, halal, vegetarian, they have even better options over there than they do here. So something to keep in mind as well. And really good Indian food, surprisingly.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see what else we've got here. So we had a few questions. Do you believe that the UK campuses will be open in September? As far as we know, they will be. They haven't changed that decision yet, but that's something to keep an eye on with your advisor. They will let you know if they hear from your university that they aren't going to be open. And the deadline for applying for September 2020 is technically June 30th. To apply to 5 universities with your UCAS application, but you can do clearing after that. So if for whatever reason you absolutely cannot meet the June 30th deadline, talk to your advisor about clearing options, because that is still a possibility. All right, let's see if there's some more questions for you, Katie. Can you apply to the bar as soon as you complete the Ncaa exams?
Yes, so you apply for the lawyer licensing process, and then away you go. So
yeah,
you can,
perfect.
Yeah.
And do students who stay in Canada have to do the Ncaas? The answer is no, they do not. But any student who goes overseas anywhere, so the UK, Australia, New Zealand, Nigeria, India, Pakistan, Cayman Islands, the US, all of them are considered internationally trained lawyers and therefore have to go through the Ncaa process. Okay, we've got your budget question. How many hours a week did you spend studying?
Because you're asking me to go back a really long time. Also, everybody's studying style is different. So, I mean, something might come easier to you than other students. And, you know, some students might have to work harder at it. So again, like I would compare it to like an undergrad degree. I can't really estimate a time or how many hours I spent. I've never estimated the amount of time, but I mean, school is your full-time job, so treat it as such.
Exactly. And I would say the average that our universities have recommended for their programs is roughly 1 hour of class equals 3 hours of reading, essentially. So
if you read it.
If you read it. If you're a good student and you do your homework. But be prepared to have to do a lot of self-study, because that's what the UK is really about, is self-study. So learn how to speed read. That's a good skill to have. There was a question. Where did I lose it here? Sorry, just slipping through your questions here, guys. And if we've missed anything in like down below, let us know so that we can make sure to catch up, okay? Passing grade for the Ncaa exams. They are pass or fail. What is the passing grade for the Ncaas? Is that bell curved? I know
I don't think so. I think it's just 50%.
Okay, but the bar exams,
the
those
bars
are
bell. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Important to note that the bar exams are bell curve. Therefore, you want to take them in the less popular time. Would that be recommended, do you think?
Absolutely. I would write them in November. So I wrote both of them in June, and that is the biggest sitting for those exams, because all of the Canadian law students write them in June, so that way they can start their articling positions right after, because they already got them lined up. Lucky them. So yeah, I wrote them in June, failed them in June, and then rewrote them in November and passed them both in November. I have friends who like wrote both in June, failed in June, and then wrote one in November and then one in March. You want to be careful about when you write them and like the timing, because if you write let's say you write your first one in March and you fail and you want to write them again in June, you have to get a whole new set of materials that you have to pay for. So the cycle starts June, November, March, not March, June, November. So just be cautious of that, I guess.
Just being aware is good, because even I learned something new today. I did not know that.
Yeah, you don't want to have to pay for new materials. And if you fail the exam, they confiscate all of your materials, all of your paper materials during the exam when it's done. So you lose everything. So one thing that I did the second time around, because you're going to have to reprint all the materials, and I can tell you, you're going to spend probably, I don't know, $300 to $500 reprinting all the material and rebinding it. I scanned all of my highlighted notes into my computer the second time around in case I failed again. So that way, if I needed to reprint them, I could reprint them all in color with my notes already on them. But because I didn't do it the first time, I do it all again.
And see, this is why we have sessions with alumni, because then you know all the little tips and tricks to keep things going.
Mm-hmm.
And you purchased study notes from someone, didn't you?
So that was for the Ncaa, not for the bar. With the Ncaa exams, I did a whole combination of things. So there is a website and a Facebook group called Ncaa Tutor, who's run by a guy named Lyra and Joseph, and he sells his notes for like the 5 core exams, I believe, for like $40 a set. And I'm telling you, if you don't do anything, buy those notes. Buy those notes. They are amazing. So that was the first thing I did. I also did the prep courses through Osgood, which again were also super helpful, especially for foundations, because there's a lot of articles that you have to read for foundations, and Osgood just summarizes them all. It's fantastic. And then I did the single course enrollment, and then like self-study in conjunction with all of that. Yeah. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I will contribute an anecdote from Deborah Wolf, the director of the Ncaa, about buying study notes. So they had an incident last year in one of the Toronto sittings where 70% of the students failed the same exam with the same wrong answers. And the reason that they can contribute to this issue was that the students bought the same notes from someone in Toronto area that had the wrong answers in those notes. And the students were entirely relying on those notes for their answers to these exams. So I caution, buying notes is great. It gives you a place to start, but definitely do the studying yourselves and make sure you're properly prepared, because you don't want someone else's wrong answers to get you into a position where you're failing these exams.
Yeah, for sure. I would never recommend to just buy the notes and study off the notes. Like, no. You use the notes as like an aid to your studying. Exactly. Yeah, to try and help like digest that material. I know that there's a lot of Facebook groups where people will post where they don't even buy the textbook and they will just buy the notes and study and pass off the notes. I do not recommend that. Buy the textbooks, invest the dollars to do that, and use those notes as like a supplemental aid as you study.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Do you remember what your GPA from Mcmaster was for acceptance at Kent?
I don't know, probably in like the 80s, I would say.
Mm-hmm. So B+, A- average? Yeah. Okay. That's pretty standard for Kent. And I would say that hasn't changed really in the 6 years that I've been doing this job either. It's been pretty consistent. What if you want to stay in the UK and become a solicitor? What is the process there? So I will just caveat this question by saying that the process is changing in September 2021. So currently you have to either do a barrister or solicitor training course. So you have to get a training contract to do that, and then do a year of placement after you've done the in-class portion for those 2 different streams, because it is a split profession in the UK. That is changing, where the solicitor route is now being replaced by the SQE, or Solicitors Qualifying Examination, in September 2021. So there's a difference in that process in that it's exams instead of a training contract scenario. Ask your advisor for information about that. There's still a lot of gray areas. So I don't want to give too much information now because it's not all confirmed yet. But it is possible. You just want to focus on networking and securing a training contract so you can get a visa to stay and work in the country. and then be able to do the solicitor's or barrister's training. Okay, let's see what else. Do you think the border will open? Yes, we're hoping the border will open for September. Again, we don't know. Who knows what COVID's going to do to everybody? The current plan is to open classes as normal. If they do end up being online, it's going to be a concern for the accreditation process, as currently the Federation will not recognize online law degrees. However, with all the Canadian law schools opening online, strictly online for September, the Federation of Law Societies of Canada is going to have to get on board with that, and that should cause changes with the accreditation. So at this point, it's still in discussion mode. The Ncaa has not been able to confirm that there will be any changes happening. They are very much doing the Ncaa thing where they say, watch this space. So I, at this point, would not recommend starting your studies online, but that could change in the coming months. So keep an eye on what's going on, talk to your advisor about your concerns, and just make sure that you're open and asking the questions, because then we can give you as much information as possible. Okay, can you study the Ncaa while in school?
I mean, technically yes, but wouldn't recommend it. I mean, you have lots of time to study, like once you graduate. So, I mean, you're just going to stress yourself out if you try and add more to your workload. So,
and it would cause some confusion, I would think, as well. Like if you're doing constitutional law and then you start studying the Canadian constitutional, you don't want that to start bleeding into your exam prep, for example. Yeah. There are groups of students. So at Kent, actually, the Canadian Student Law Society has started running Ncaa kind of prep groups. So they do little mini tutorials with other society members, essentially, in your final year of your LLB. So that's something to keep an eye out for. And you can always start your own little study groups with people in your area. So guaranteed there is someone in your social network that is studying for the Ncaas at the same time you are. So great way to start up study groups and help each other get through the material without having to pay extra for everything, right?
Yeah.
All right. A British LLM and LLB will not reduce the amount of Ncaa exams one would have to write when coming back to Canada. So technically, yes. If you do a 3-year LLB, you'll have the minimum number of 5 exams because you have 3 years of law school if you have 2 years of post-secondary. So that's the important thing. The magic formula for the Federation is 2 years of post-secondary, which is considered university, not college, has to be university, and 3 years of law school. Okay. That's what they're looking for. So if you have 2 years of post-secondary, you complete 3 years of law, whether it be a 3-year LLB or a 2-year LLB and a 1-year LLM, some combination of that, that will get you 3 years of law, then you only do the 5 exams. If you have anything less than 2 years of post-secondary and 3 years of law school, you will get assigned a couple extra exams. That's the basic. That's the formula. If you don't get 55% in your courses and all of your core courses in the UK system, you will likely have to write additional exams. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You really want to be doing the best you can in your degree anyway. I think everybody would agree that you really want to be hitting those good grades, but 55% is the minimum for the Ncaa. All right. Did you get a part-time job while you were in school, and does the workload allow it? That's a great question.
So I did not, but I kind of grew up in a household where I don't work while I go to school. My parents supported me through everything. So yeah, I didn't work. I worked in the summer when I came home, worked through my Ncaa and my articling as well. I do know that there were students that did get part-time jobs while they were in the UK, but I think that there's a limit on the amount of hours that you're allowed to work based on your visa requirements. So you have to be careful with that.
Yes, so the limit is 20 hours a week during course time and 40 during holiday seasons. So if you're not in classes, you can work up to 40 hours a week. With your workload, it's not recommended to take more than 10 to 15 hours of work, just because you want to make sure you're allowing time for your studies. You can probably pay your living expenses on 10 to 15 hours of work a week. That would cover kind of groceries and living costs. Think about your travel plans as well, because committing to a part-time job then means that you're restricted from being able to travel. So Of course, if that's part of your budget and you need to be working to pay for your bills, then that is absolutely possible. There are tons of student jobs out there, very typical, same jobs that you would find in Canada. So mostly retail and food services, I would say. Some admin stuff, but yeah, it's definitely possible. There are just some restrictions, and you want to make sure that you're factoring in all of them. Okay. Did you get cold called a lot? I'm not sure what the context of that question is. Do you have any thoughts on that one?
Cold calls? No.
No? Okay. If I did my bar exam in the UK and decided to come back to Canada, do I still need to do the job placement and the bar in Canada or just the Ncaa?
So if you do the bar in the UK, then I'm assuming we're talking about the UK bar there, because you can't write the bar here. So that would, you would have to go through the lawyer licensing process in the UK to be able to write the bar and practice as a lawyer in the UK. If you then get called to the bar and then come back to Canada, you will have to go through, I think I don't know if you have to do the NCAs or if there's some kind of equivalent thing. I think you might have to do the NCAs. Yeah, actually, I think you do. Yeah. But there's looser restrictions on your lawyer licensing process, because if you have experience in the UK, let's say, then it could shorten or get rid of your articling term. But I believe you still would have to write the bar exams, if I'm not mistaken. So
yes.
Yeah.
From my understanding, you still have to do the NCAs because that is your basic equivalency. And then to be able to practice in a different jurisdiction, you always have to complete their bar process. So even if you changed provinces, you may be required to write that provincial exam. If you decided to practice in the US, you would have to write their exams as well and potentially do an equivalency. So coming back from the UK, it depends on how much time you've practiced. So how much physical time you've done in a law firm, they will factor that into your articling equivalency and determine how much articling you have to complete. It may wipe out a few months, it may wipe out the entirety, depends on the length of time you've been practicing. But yeah, the bar exams are still required and the NCAA is always required, although probably the minimum NCAA at that point.
Mm-hmm.
But again, on a case-by-case basis, so you won't know exactly what happens until you apply for assessment.
Right.
Always the way the Ncaa goes. All right, how much on average did you spend studying and how much free time? So I think we covered this one already. Is it easy to make friends? That's a good one.
Again, that depends on what kind of person you are. I mean, if you're an extroverted, I like to talk to everybody kind of person, then yeah, you'll do great making friends. I mean, I would consider it the same as how do you make friends here? If you're going to university, it's the same thing. I wouldn't say that students there are gonna snub you or something, So I mean, get involved, you'll make friends. So
on a similar line, did you find it isolating or scary to move across the world alone?
Yep, 100%. I had never been to the UK before. I had never been to Europe before. I did not have the luxury of my parents taking a trip and flying over to the UK to go and visit the schools and tour the schools and make an informed decision as to where I was going to go. I literally chose the school from the website based on face-to-face interactions that I had with the representatives from the school, hopped on a plane and was like, I'll see you in 3 months. And yeah, it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life. And, getting there to a new country, yes, the school's going to pick you up, which is good. But then it was well, here, I'm dropping you off. Go figure out your residence. You're sleep deprived because of the time difference. All you want to do is sleep. And, you need to try and figure out where you're living and unpacking and getting your student ID and where you're going to buy groceries and where you're going to eat, that was my biggest thing. I still remember to the day, my first day getting there and I didn't have any food in the airport. They took me directly to the school. And then a UK school is very different than a Canadian school. So Canadian schools will have a food court, let's say. The UK schools, or at least at Kent, did not have that. They have on-campus pubs that open up at 4 o'clock, and you have to go and sit there and eat. Or they have a grocery store on campus. Well, I don't feel like cooking. I was just on a flight and I'm sleep deprived, you know? So then it's like, oh, what? Now you're telling me I have to get a bus pass and go into town to get groceries? I've never done this before. So, I mean, yeah, it was a really scary thing. And being on your own, yeah, like it's hard. And like, yeah, you might cry. I'm pretty sure I cried my first day. But I mean, technology is a wonderful thing. And, you know, you can get on your WhatsApp or Skype or whatever and video call home. And I mean, yeah, it got easier. It definitely did. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say my experience was different because my parents did move me in for my mom's reassurance more than mine. She just really wanted to see where I was going. And I was 24 when I went. So, you know, parents do need to hear from you. But the two pieces of advice I would recommend when moving in, well, maybe three. Know where you're going. So have the address of the place you're going to, your block or your flat number. Know that information so that when someone asks you, you have it available. Don't just have to go digging through your suitcases to find it, because that's the one thing that your brain does not want to think about when you arrive, as you say, sleep deprived and the next day in a new time zone, right? Two, they have delivery pizza of many types in the UK, and it's Domino's and Pizza Hut. So you'll be familiar with delivery pizza. I don't know anybody who doesn't like pizza personally. It was my go-to. Find a place, have them deliver you pizza. If you're starving, they will do it, and they will do it up to like 2 a.m. So there you go. Easy peasy. And three, just be prepared. So do some research into the place and know kind of what you're getting yourself into. Get excited about it so that when you get there, it's a little less terrifying. And the last one I'll say, so I have 4 pieces of advice. I apologize, I can't count. The fourth one is plan to go home for Christmas. So if you're really, really nervous about moving overseas, it's good to have a timeline. So say, you know what, it's only for 3 months. I get to go home the second week of December and spend time with my family. Have that flight in your mind. I wouldn't necessarily book it in advance because your dates of classes can change, but make sure that you have a plan to go home, because that's your end goal, going home. And then you can count down to those days if you're really having a hard time, or you can start to get excited about the UK, and then it's just a chance to see your family and go back to this new home that you have in the UK. So I would say, yeah, that's the main thing, is have that plan to go when you need to go home, and always go home for that first Christmas if you can. Your parents will appreciate it. Your family, your friends, everybody will want to see you and ask all about your experience of going overseas. Okay, so we have a couple more questions. Sorry, guys, we've run a bit over, but these are great questions. Can you take classes in the summer? The answer would be no. There's only one program I know of that offers classes over the summer. Most of the schools shut down entirely over the summer, except for postgraduate studies, and usually then it's only dissertation related sessions. So yeah, you won't be in classes over the summer with an LLB program. Could one have a part-time job while studying? Yes, you can definitely hold a part-time job. Budget for food, clothes, etc. really depends on you and your lifestyle. So think about what you're going to spend. I would say don't take your entire wardrobe with you, because you are going to buy clothes there, and accommodation at the UK universities is not that big. It is not big. I mean, I took far too many pairs of shoes. I took 5 suitcases worth of stuff, and there was not enough space for the stuff I took with me. I had to buy extra furniture to house my extra stuff. So don't do what I did. 2 suitcases max. Would you agree with that, Katie?
Absolutely. And I had 2 suitcases that were like overweight. So I like overweighted them to like the max and then paid the additional with the airline. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that's about the maximum you want to take, because you need to be able to handle those when you arrive yourself as well. You're not going to have a valet to help you with your stuff unless you're taking your entire family to help you, which I did. I could get my stuff to the UK. I just had no place to put it when I got there, which was the problem. Do they have a meal plan? So that comes with accommodation, usually only undergraduates. So like 18-year-olds in specific housing have meal plans required for part of their accommodation. Most do not. All student accommodation has a kitchen. So get used to cooking now. And think about budgeting. I would say maybe 30 to 50 pounds a week for food, depending on how you eat. If you eat out a lot, I spend, I think, 30 pounds on average, and then I bought takeout pizza every 2 weeks. So
I would also like go prepared with some like kitchen utensils or like pots as well. Cause I remember like, you know, when I showed up, they give you like, each of us had like our own cupboard with like a plate, a bowl, like a fork, a knife, like things like that, like standard things. But like a frying pan, for an example, or like a pot to boil water. Like those are things that I had to like go out and buy, or like a cutting board, a knife, like for like actually like cutting, you know, like if you're into cooking. So I remember, and also like figuring out in advance where to shop. So that was a big thing for me because they don't have the same stores in the UK as we have here. And so I was going into town and buying luxurious items at Fenwick's, which, you know, is basically like the equivalent of the Bay, let's say, where I was buying a frying pan and a knife and spending a lot of money on these big items. And, you know, I then found out that people were buying items at like Wilkinson's, which is a much cheaper store. I would compare it to like Big Lots in the States, if you know what that is. Or IKEA. Yeah, that's a good comparison, where you can go and get like a lot of like student friendly items, like for the kitchen stuff at a much cheaper price. They also have, what's it called? It's not Walmart.
TK Maxx?
No, it starts with an A, I think.
Asda?
Asda. No. Asda? Was it Asda? I can't remember now, but they do have like a department store that's like the equivalent of Walmart.
Asda is like a grocery store. It depends on where you are because there's different versions in different cities. But we do provide a nice big PDF with all of that information. So what are the main grocery stores? What are the main shopping malls? Like all of this sort of stuff. So ask your advisor about that. We usually send it out kind of July, August when you guys are preparing to go. It's our kind of pre-departure guide. So lots of tidbits in there and cheap travel as well. We love to talk about that. So all of those things. Big question marks. You won't know what you're looking at when you walk around, but hopefully our guide will help you answer those questions. You can also check out charity shops. That's one thing. The charity shops in the UK is a very different thing than it is here. They're everywhere and they have great stuff. I bought ridiculously expensive shoes for like £10 at a charity shop in Dublin when I was there. And, you know, you can find crazy inexpensive stuff, random stuff like kitchen stuff, super cheap. So keeping those options in mind. All right, if the school year doesn't open in September, are we a year behind? So I'm afraid I can't answer that one because I just don't know. We don't know what's going to happen. COVID is a crazy uncertain time, and I apologize I can't give you a straight answer for that. But it could happen that they delay everybody until January start. You could be delayed until September and have your seat kept open. I just don't know. I'm sorry, but keep in touch with your advisor and they should be able to answer those questions as the term goes on. Okay, she's clarified what cold calling is. It's basically being called on by a professor without putting your hand up for answering a question. So I know some professors that I've traveled with over the years who do that, and they do it because they like an interactive class. But if you're not putting your hand up to answer questions, did you do your homework?
I mean, you could be shy. That's being a little unfair.
Yeah, but as a lawyer, you need to have good speaking skills, so you should be interacting. So anyway, that would be me calling you out, saying, you know, you need to be participating. That's what school is all about, is learning, and part of being a lawyer is interacting with clients. So you need to be able to be answering questions and raising your hand and participating. So whether they cold call or not really depends on the professor, but be prepared.
Yeah.
After submitting your application, how long should you expect to hear back from them? That really varies. So some universities get back to you within 1 day. I've had students receive offers within 24 hours of submitting. Other students and other universities can take weeks. So it depends on the university. It depends on when you apply. So yesterday was a holiday in the UK. You won't be getting any responses probably until tomorrow because everybody's been off. So thinking about that sort of thing, I would say usually 2 to 3 weeks at this time of year is a long time to wait for an offer. If you haven't received decisions in 2 to 3 weeks of applying, get in touch with your advisor and let them know so that you can start pushing the ball on those. I think we're almost done. Thanks, Marika. Yeah, I thought it was Asda. Oh, Poundland. That's
Yeah,
a good
Poundland. I know, I saw that. I love Poundland.
Dollarama equivalent. Poundland is good. If you have one in your area, definitely scope that out. Awesome. So I think we covered everybody's questions. I'm pretty sure we were fairly thorough with everything. If we missed anything, please do ask your advisor. We can always get you in touch with Katie. I think you're really happy to answer questions, especially about Kent and your personal experience. So just let us know. We can always get you in touch with Katie for follow-up questions. But I want to say thank you for sticking with us to the end. This has been a great session. We've had lots of awesome questions. And thank you, Katie, so much for your time. It's been great to have you share your experiences. I'm sure all of the students on here would agree that having the expression of your experience has been invaluable in helping them make a decision about what they want to do and whether this is the right choice for them. So thanks to everyone all around for taking your evening with us today. We really appreciate it. Best of luck with everything. Take care, stay safe, and good luck with your applications. Have a good night, guys.
Have a good night, guys.
And we're getting all the thank yous. All right, thanks everyone. I will shut her down. Bye.
Bye.